Welcome everyone to a new episode of Esports Boom, your weekly esports business podcast. My name is Maurice Eisenman and I'm as always joined by Anton Ferraro. Anton, how are you?
It's good, man. I think we took a week off last week. You were traveling, I was traveling. How was your Dallas trip?
It was great. Dallas, the food is incredible. It's warm. It was really what I needed. And like I said to you before the recording, I ate so much food that if I would have stayed for 2 more days, they would have had to roll me back to New York.
Well, I'm glad that you made it back so that we can film another episode of the show.
How was Vegas and how was the Madden Challenge?
Oh, Vegas was incredible. So I was out there to shoot a program called Beyond the Sticks, and then we dovetailed that into the Madden Challenger event. I met a lot of the Madden players, got to learn a little bit more about that community. And then in the meantime, the first episode of Beyond the Sticks came out on the Mixer channel. So, it's been a really eventful weekend. It was great to film. It was great to be on site. The event was a smashing success. And I think if you follow me on social media, you probably saw some of the pictures. But, it was good. I think the one similarity your trip and mine had was that, we ate a lot. And I think we probably ate a lot of cows.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's jump right into it. It's been 2 weeks, so I think we're going to try and hit the biggest stories of the last 2 weeks. And the one that I think caught the most attention was NRG getting their $15 million investment. And I know you've been tracking the story, so what are your thoughts on it?
Well, let's just get some of the facts straight first. So as far as from what the articles have given us for information, so it's a Series B. Obviously, the Series A had and the C that people like Andy Miller and Shaq was involved. So the Series B had a round that included kind of a mixture of 2 types of categories of people. So on one hand, you had these celebrities, people like Jennifer Lopez, Marshawn Lynch, Arod, and Michael Strahan all invested in the company. And then secondly, you had more of the traditional tech investors, people like Twitter COO and former NFL Chief Financial Officer Anthony Noto, Sacramento Kings minority owner and Sacramento Republic owner Kevin Nagel, and Fortress Investment Group Chairman Peter Breiger. What's interesting about the latter category is that they're all from the Bay. The first group of investors, they'll bring great social capital to NRG. One of the problems with the NRG has is that they're not as popular as some of the other teams. They don't have the social reach. Hopefully, these celebrities can help with that. We've already seen their Overwatch introductory video had J-Lo in there, had Marshawn in there, so that was really awesome. I doubt they'll bring a lot of intellectual capital, but then again, you have the second group of investors, CEO of Twitter and the Fortress Investment Group chairmen. Those are people that can bring kind of the intellectual capital that you need from a strategic perspective.
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple things that jump out. I'm going to go through the list of names and then just tell you all my little anecdotes about everybody. So for those of you not keeping up with the tabloids, Alex Rodriguez and Jennifer Lopez are in a massive relationship right now, so it's interesting that he brought her up. Arod is also, I think he's the only repeat investor, because I think he was initially listed as one of the NRG investors in their first announcement. And out of all the other names, he's the only one who's repeating. So it seems like, Shaq and company, they went out and they got a bunch of new people to invest so that they could diversify their risk. Props to Arod for going in for 2. Michael Strahan, so he was a football player. I think the interesting story there is that he's investing in an esports, and he sold his house to Dustin Beck about a year ago. So Dustin Beck is living in Michael Strahan's old house. So I think, through that connection, maybe he's a little bit aware of esports. Some guy comes around, buys your house for, $10 million more than you paid for it. And you're like, well, I wonder how he made his money. So then you go in and, you find your own piece of that pie. Anthony Noto. So he is this chief operating officer of Twitter and the former NFL chief financial officer. What's really interesting about him is about 2 years ago, he got Twitter the most ridiculous NFL deal ever. I think they were streaming Thursday night games or Monday night games.
They were streaming the Thursday night games. So he got that Amazon now has.
Right, and he got those games. He got 10 games for $10 million, which is unreal. If you think about how much the NFL rights go for, it's pretty crazy. And I know Twitter right now is, they're also pushing into live content. They're trying to secure things. He's trying to understand how these teams work. He understands that it's the future. So, getting him on board is incredible. Esports lives on Twitter. So having him, be a cheerleader for the vertical is incredible. And then Fortress Investment Group. Maurice, I don't know if you know this, but is this the same Fortress that owns the Bucks, or is this a totally different and just a small coincidence?
I do not know. I don't think so, because I probably would have seen that in the articles that I read about.
So yeah, I mean, we'll have to double check on whether or not Peter Berger is involved with what is it? FlyQuest is the Fortress investment team.
Yeah, but that's with Edens, right?
Yeah, West Edens, yeah. So, I mean, good raise for NRG. I talk to Brett, their president, pretty regularly. Brett, he comes from WMEIMG. He kind of, cheerleaded the WMEIMG's efforts into esports. He's very capable. I think another person that he got involved into esports was John from T-Mobile. It's the CEO of T-Mobile. They have their own news that we'll cover in a second. But again, it's like, it's people who can attract the right partners, who can guide these teams, and who have the right experience. The one statement that I would disagree is that where you said like, oh, J-Lo and Arod, they don't bring intellectual capital. Okay, probably not with strategy, but these guys, they've been around in entertainment for 30 years, and it's kind of like they've probably taken their beatings. They've probably learned some valuable lessons, and I don't mind that somebody with their amount of experience is out there guiding, our fledgling little industry. I think there's value that they bring.
There's definitely value besides just the social capital and the financial capital. Also, what is really interesting is that they went for a multitude of investors as opposed to a couple big investors.
Yes.
That is always interesting. That could be because these investors just didn't want to put down the money.
Yeah, it feels similar to what happened with like Jay-Z and the Barclays Center a couple years ago, where, when they moved the Brooklyn Nets, they basically gave Jay-Z, a tiny percentage. It was something like less than 1%. But then every piece of marketing that you saw for the Brooklyn Nets was, hello Brooklyn, every single one of his songs, Brooklyn's favorite son brings a team to Brooklyn. They probably gave these guys, I'd imagine that the strategic guys were the ones who did the heavy investing. And I feel that these guys are a little bit like, to your point, social cheerleaders, but they do bring additional value.
Yeah, and also it's completely understandable traditional sports players and entertainers want to get into esports because a lot of them have made billions of dollars for their respective teams. I mean, Arod has made a tremendous amount of money, but he has made arguably more money for the teams that he played for. And he's all of these, you constantly hear these traditional sports players complaining about how they make all this money, yet the owners, all of a sudden, their sports teams go from a couple $100 million to being worth billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So a lot of them are thinking ahead, and they're thinking, if I can take the risk with esports, and if esports becomes as big as baseball or what any other sport, then I will take that role, and like I can be the person that I've wanted to be.
Absolutely. Anytime you have that many Type A personalities, their one question in their head is, how do I get higher up on the food chain?
For NRG, I'm just hoping that Arod and J-Lo don't break up.
Oh,
because I can't imagine
that
being too good for the team.
No, I'm sure that that's it's a lot of tension that people don't want. So I think so NRG raised $15 million, and I think it's a nice segue into our next story, which is Cloud9 raising $19 million of a $25 million round, and I think that puts their team at a valuation of about $100 million.
Yes.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's pretty interesting. This hasn't been confirmed yet, as opposed to NRG. The federal documents have been looked into, and that does give confirmation, but it hasn't been confirmation from Cloud9's perspective. Definitely a different type of investment than NRG. We're seeing FunPlus CEO Andy Zhang and Brian Singer in a founders fund. FunPlus, I think, was already one of the investors in the seed fund. Both of them are appointed to the board of directors. So that's really like a traditional kind of venture capital. Like they either run the round or they invest money into it. and now they're going to help with the strategic vision and help grow. So it's a lot more traditional than NRG, but breaking the 100 million barrier was something I did not expect to see for a year or two. So I think that's incredible, and props to Cloud9 for being able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really high valuation. I think that, for those of you that don't know, Jack Antonin, I might be butchering his name, he, prior to starting his own esports team, he did a little work for TSM, but he was an incredible salesperson for Crunchyroll. And at Crunchyroll, every year he would get a higher and higher, commission rate just because he was so effective. And he kept trying to leave Crunchyroll in order to basically, start his own shop. And they kept trying to lure him back with more and more financial benefits. And if you look at Cloud9, he positioned them in such a way where you have WMEIMG and Twitch both acting as their sales agents. So he created the situation where these two organizations, on some level, they work hand in hand to find sponsorships for these teams, but on some level, they're also competing. And just the incentivization structure of that, it speaks to his, acumen as a salesperson and knowing what's best for his team. So Cloud9, Jack, they find talent, they develop talent. Even a couple of years ago, before all this VC money came in, he had a great business model of developing academy teams and then selling them off. And the fact that he was able to just create such a competitive team through that funding channel, if somebody is going to stay on top of how you make esports relevant, and if somebody's going to get that $100 million valuation, I think that those are the right teams. I think that Cloud9, TSM, Optic, and FaZe are the four teams that are in that world right now.
Absolutely, I think an investment in NRG, and this is not a diss to them, because they're the other four teams, like you mentioned, are exceptions. But an investment in NRG, I think, is more an investment in the industry as a whole. Yeah. They have an Overwatch League spot. They're applying for an LCS spot. If the Overwatch League does well, this investment will pay off. There's franchising. I think an investment in Cloud9 is not only an investment in the industry, but at the same time is also an investment in Jack.
Yes.
In the founders.
Yep, absolutely. And it's the worst kept secret, but it's Cloud9 and TSM are basically one team, and they're just they work hand in hand, and there's a lot of synergy with Team Liquid, and it's nice that you're investing in a team that has support from other organizations. I think I forget who's all part of that like little cabal, but it's Cloud9, TSM, Immortals, Team Liquid, and I think Echo Fox is the one that's a little bit on the outside, just because Rick Fox, he's trying to do his own thing. He didn't join PEA. There's a couple of, he's a little bit on the outside. But again, he's also doing great things. No complaints with the way Rick has been doing, operating his team. I think he just wants to, keep it separate. So I see the next article that you wanted to cover. Do you have any other thoughts?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So the next article that Mo selected was that Splice enters a partnership with Lagardère Sports. Lagardère. So I'm not from Europe, so I'll defer to your judgment on this one.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So Lagardère Sports is kind of a consultant sponsorship. Think them like kind of a WME, IMG, what they're doing in sports at least, right? So they're this huge consultancy, management, marketing company out of France, and they work with pretty much everyone in sports. They're incredibly big in soccer, but recently they've been getting into esports. They have partnership with two teams. Ninjas in Pajamas is one of them. The other one I'm blanking out right now, but they just announced a deal with Splice. So this is interesting because the collaboration will focus mainly on sales for Splice, and it will focus primarily on Asia and Europe, which makes sense because in America, Lagardère's arm is not as big, reach is not as big, and also they already have their venture partners in America. So I think this is really good for the industry because Lagardère can easily make these connections, and they have been very successful in Asia and Europe specifically. So this is really good, especially if Splice will not make it into the LCS and will have to go to the EU LCS. This makes even more sense.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the one story that kind of stands out to me is that you had one of Splice's, I think, general managers who, resigned. Everybody was happy. There's no drama, but his main reason was that he didn't want to move to the U.S. So it'll be interesting if Splice ends up in Europe, and this feels like, a good, hedge bet in order to make sure that they have those revenue streams out there. I think it's Asia's a huge market. It's a growing market. I think it's a little strange that they're focusing on it, just because I don't know if, Splice is suited to be the face of esports on that continent.
I don't think. Yeah, I think it's more about getting sponsorship. I think Europe they do have a lot of potential. Asia they have a really really good StarCraft player.
Mm-hmm. But it's StarCraft.
I know.
What year is this?
But still, you can, if you place your bets well, you get some minor sponsorship, and I think it's a bet.
Yeah.
Because if they end up in America, Lagardère they have a huge office in Midtown as well. They will be able to get clients, but especially if they end up in Europe, they'll have the best sales representation for them there.
Yep. No, a good move. People are trying to monetize. It's exactly what everything should. You got to pay back all this VC money, or you're going to flounder. And these are the companies that are going to help you do it.
Yeah, and talking about sponsorship deals and sales representation, one of the biggest sponsorship deals, and there are three really big ones this week. But the first one I'm going to talk about is that the fact that Riot partnered up with T-Mobile for Worlds 2017. So WMING brokered this deal, and it's they'll be presenting sponsor for Worlds 2017, which is happening right now, and they will have a periodic segment called the Best of the Rift. So they will, sell. It's like a short segment every week that is like who was the best player, or like the best moves being made, and let's highlight these players presented by T-Mobile. I've said it once and I'll say it again. Telecom and internet providers, they have to be on the forefront of esports. It makes so much sense. Korea's been doing it for ages. It's about time that T-Mobile gets more and more aggressive. They are out of the big American ones, even though T-Mobile is a European company. But they're the most on esports. I think that will pay up in the long term. What do you think, Anton?
So I think I've seen T-Mobile spread their money around in a bunch of different places. I saw them go to Overwatch League. That was, I think, a week ago. I saw that they're now with TSM and Cloud9, which are two great teams. And now that they're in LCS, that's excellent. I think Riot historically has always been very they didn't go out and try and get a ton of sponsors. I know there was a lot of sponsorship interest in the LCS World Championships. With all these numbers coming out, like, oh, it's the size of like the NBA Finals. It's not, but they generally only pick one kind of to maintain value. So the fact that T-Mobile got it is pretty great. I think WMEIMG is going to have a lot of excellent information based on with this game versus that game, this team versus this league. I'm curious to know how much the money is. So how much money like this deal cost? Because from what I've heard, there haven't been that many sponsorship deals in the 7-figure range. Everything has kind of been in the 6-figure range. And I know for Riot, what they spend on production for putting on Worlds, it's probably easily over $10 million. Mm-hmm. That this is a drop in the bucket. I think the other thing that was touted a while ago was that BAMTech was going to be selling sponsorship rights for the Riot broadcast. Worlds has started, and we still haven't seen the BAMTech product. And they were part of their deal was that they were going to get the rights to sell these sponsorships. So their absence from this headline, it's interesting. I really BAMTech's building a tech product. Esports is going to succeed through tech and disruptive products, and I am a little upset to not see them being involved as much as I thought that they would be.
Yeah, well, I think the big story a couple of weeks ago was the fact that BAMTech is incredibly behind with their scheduling. So I think they first want to focus on getting the tech right, which is the main reason why they were hired in the first place, or why this deal was made in the first place. And if that's successful and they have a distribution strategy, then they can go and sell these distribution rights. They can sell sponsorship rights on top of that. But if the tech isn't ready, you're trying to run before you can walk.
No, I mean, yeah, it feels like, it's one of those Fibonacci sequence project management problems where, your one little problem in step one is, creating two little problems in step two. And, if they don't, pick up their momentum, it's, two problems is going to turn into three problems is going to turn into five problems is going to turn into 8. And, great for Riot. You got a sponsorship. I don't think it was that hard for you. I think that you have people probably knocking at your door. Great for WMEIMG, great vertical. The loser in this situation, I think, is BAMTech.
Yeah, and to your points about Riot being hesitant for sponsors, give it 2 years, they won't be. Because with the NALCS franchising, with the EULCS expanding like that, and there are going to be a lot more teams, these teams will want to get sponsors themselves, but Riot will need to have more sponsors as well, because they're giving out a clear signal that League of Legends Esports is going to be a moneymaker. It's not just going to be a marketing tool.
Yeah.
So they will need to attract more and more sponsors.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's like what they're trying to create the visibility of exclusivity, right? The number one rule of sales is that when you sell something, make sure that people come back and buy it again. And so, not going out and just grabbing all this money this year. So, it's a smart and calculated decision. Then we had a couple of other sponsorship stories. The one that I just didn't see was that there was what was it? It was Astralis got the Coco sponsorship.
Yeah.
And the only reason why I just wanted to touch on that is because the headline was that it was a 7-figure deal, and everything that I heard was that it was every other deal has been 6 figures. So, I'd love to be, fly on the wall and see what the contract looked like and whether or not, there's clawback provisions or whatnot. But, props to Astralis. I think this week they got Coco. Last week they got the Jack and Jones. I think Astralis is owned by Refresh, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the Refresh management team, they're out there, they're killing it.
Well,
props to them.
And a while ago, this is actually their second 7-figure deal, because it was reported, at least in the Daily Mail. I don't know how valid that source is, that their deal with Turtle Beach previously was also in the 7 figures.
I don't think Turtle Beach has that type of money. I mean, the way that the Turtle Beach deals generally work is that it's percentage of units sold.
Yeah.
So if they sell those headphones, great. But if they don't sell those headphones, I don't feel like it's they probably just put a ceiling on it as opposed to here's the cash payment of $1 billion.
So then the last type of sponsorship that I think we're going to talk about is Coca-Cola's deal, which is really fascinating, and it's not necessarily esports specific, it's more gaming in general. But FIFA 18 has FIFA 17 started it. They have a story mode, which all of the traditional sports games now have, especially the ones from EA, where you play as Alex Hunter, this young kid from England, and you basically, you become a superstar. And the story mode stopped kind of in his early 20s. He just made a big break for a couple seasons, and then this story mode for FIFA 18, he's becoming even bigger. He can go to I think Bayern Munich is one of their partners. They have a couple partner teams. Actually this morning, there'll be a Times Square ad with Alex Hunter. And Coca-Cola is actually the sponsor for it. Becomes Alex Hunter's first sponsor, main brand sponsor in the game.
So Alex Hunter, though, is a fictional character.
Yes, he's a virtual player in the story mode of FIFA 18.
See, the machine's already taking over. They're just pushing out the players.
Exactly. Elon Musk is right.
No, I mean, great move by Coca-Cola. I think that one of the interesting aspects of this deal, and I hope I'm not going to get in trouble for saying this too soon, is that it's such a safe bet, because it's every decision that Alex Hunter makes in the game, or probably whatever happens, Coca-Cola is going to have visibility on. That eliminates a lot of risk. So it's imagine if you were sponsoring that player from the Bears-Packers game last night, where he headbutted a guy and sent somebody to the ER. It's imagine if we sponsor Ronaldo, or Ronaldo, right? That's the guy. And Ronaldo headbutts somebody. That's such a negative
Well,
possibility.
yes, but the thing I like about this is that they, it is actually like it's the perfect native advertising because this makes sense. If you're Alex Hunter, you as a player, like if you're playing the game, you want Alex to get a sponsorship deal because that'll bring in more money for you and that it allows you to do more things. And it happens to be Coca-Cola. That's awesome, and it's not kind of pushed into you. I actually think I remember from this FIFA 18 came out this week. So FIFA 17, I remember that you could screw up with Alex. So I'm not sure if he's going to get a sponsorship deals in all the kind of storylines, and he might be able to lose a sponsorship deal. But they actually they filmed a fake commercial, which is kind of a spoof of the old David Beckham commercial with Pepsi.
Yeah.
And they actually created kind of the Coca-Cola version of it with Alex Hunter, which is brilliant because every soccer fan will appreciate it, and it shows once again that investments and sponsorship in gaming goes further than just esports teams and esports leagues. It goes into the actual game as well now.
No, I mean, incredible. Great move. I want to go to the next story, which is the Tencent buys 5% of Bluehole, which is the PUBG studio. Now, not necessarily esports, but PUBG is so big right now, and there's a lot of esports buzz around it, and they have an esports department that I felt like it was important to cover. I'm going to start this story maybe a couple of weeks back, and then move forward as things have progressed. Because for me, this is so interesting, just because this is how business gets done now. About 4 weeks ago, there was a rumor that Tencent had purchased 15% of Bluehole. It was circling for about a day or two, and then Bluehole came out and said, no, Tencent owns no percentage of this company. Get away from us. We're not involved with them. Then there was a rumor that Tencent bought out some previous investors. It was really unclear what was going on. Fast forward to last week, and Epic Games releases a mode for their game called Fortnite that is identical to PUBG Battlegrounds for all intents and purposes. It gets a lot of hype, a lot of traction. There's Bluehole goes out. I think they make a statement. They're upset for a litany of reasons. And then a week later, Tencent now owns 5% of Bluehole. And I think what this illustrates is, how business works when you are a new and rising star facing off against a larger company. Tencent basically put their cards on the table and said, you will either sell for X or we will spend 10X and develop a game that is identical to yours. And they have Epic Games, they have Riot, they have all these assets at their disposal. And this is kind of like what you saw happen with Snapchat and Instagram, where Facebook attempted to buy Snapchat, and Snapchat said, no, we're going to stay independent. And then Facebook said, all right, we're going to just plug in your formula into our user base with Instagram. And it's, you're seeing the exact same thing happen in gaming right now.
Yeah, and I also think what's really interesting is there's a reason why Tencent probably was all right with 5%. And the biggest reason is PUBG by itself obviously is a huge money maker, but PUBG is incredibly popular in China, which is Tencent's biggest market, but it's not for sale on WeGame, which is Tencent's kind of software platform. It is only for sale on Steam. So Steam is not as popular in China right now, but has gotten hundreds and thousands of people buying the game and playing the game, maybe even millions in China, through Steam. So this obviously is a nightmare scenario for Tencent, because they don't want to give people reasons to go to Steam as opposed to WeGame. And now, by owning 5% of PUBG, I won't be surprised if in a couple weeks, or maybe even sooner, you'll get PUBG available on WeGame, and maybe even letting it be a China exclusive from now on WeGame.
Yeah, and I think one of the statistics that speaks to your point is PUBG surpassed Overwatch in PC bangs, I think in China or Korea or both. So it's definitely getting a lot of momentum. The Bluehole right now is trying to access every distribution channel they can. I think it's coming as an Xbox exclusive. For those of you that are kind of paying attention to the console scene, there's a huge there's somewhat of a battle right now between Microsoft and Sony, and there's a lot of interesting scenarios that are playing out. So PUBG is going to be Xbox exclusives, which is interesting. And then there was another game that was supposed to have cross functionality between Xbox and PlayStation. And the rumor has it that Xbox was okay with, having their console connect with Sony PlayStation, but PlayStation was not okay with that. So PlayStation right now is trying to build the walls. I think that on a lot of these games, like that are available on both consoles, you're starting to see a shift to one console versus the other. So a great example of this is Call of Duty. Call of Duty, from what I remember, the numbers were much higher of a natural install base on Xbox, but all the tournaments are played on PlayStation, and so it's like every tournament is brought to you by PlayStation. So Bluehole is entering a marketplace that is starved for video game content, and when you have a hit, you can make a ton of money by accessing the right distribution channels.
Yeah, and one thing with regards to the console wars between PlayStation and Xbox, it's good to mention two things. First of all, Xbox, if you're American, you think Xbox is a competitor to PlayStation. Obviously, they're competitors. Go outside of the US, and they're not comparable.
Yeah.
Like, go to Europe, go to Asia, and Xbox will probably sell in a year what PlayStation sells in like 2-3 weeks. So as far as console sales, in the US, that's a different story. And then secondly, let's not forget the Switch. A lot of mobile developers are trying to go to the Switch as their go-to platform. We saw it with Tencent's MMO title King of Glory,
yep.
Or however it's called right now, actually announcing that they're going to be on the Switch. I think more and more developers will follow. And that might take away a lot of potential customers from PlayStation and Xbox.
Yeah, and it's interesting, especially I think Sony also announced last week that they're not releasing. I think it's another View.
Yeah. Because of mobile competition.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the people that were banking or kind of had strategies set up for the View, they might be pivoting to the Switch.
They're not another Via.
Via. But anyway, so Bluehole, great position. Now you're being bullied around a little bit by Tencent, but I'm sure that you'll make some extra money. $4.6 billion is a giant valuation. But yeah. So I think, while we're talking about valuations, let's hit upon Gfinity. Gfinity raised another $7 million.
7 million pounds.
7 million pounds, I'm sorry. And I think you were hovering over the story a little bit more, so do you want to get into a little bit greater depth with it?
Yeah, so Gfinity, which has done extremely well this year, they're kind of a smaller version of ESL, I would say. They have been doing tremendous stuff in England. They have worked with BBC on a lot of tournaments. They are slowly expanding into Australia as well with some tournaments. And they just got £7 million, which is about $9.4 million. And they're looking for that money to do three things. So they want to develop their Gfinity Elite Series, which is kind of their big tournament platform. They want to further their international expansion, and they want to continue their technology platform, which is probably their IP, things that are unique to Gfinity. So props to them. They've been doing incredible stuff in England. Like I said, they are going to Australia. They're going to other English-speaking countries to kind of expand. I don't think they're necessarily nearly in the realms of an ESL, but they are more of I would say they are, if they can get the crops that ESL doesn't get, and they can build a solid business off of it, they can do very, very well for themselves.
Yeah, I think Gfinity has demonstrated that they can create a lot of momentum for their brand, and they have done so in the past 6 months. I am really curious to see what their own technology platform is, because I really hope it's just not another tournament matchmaking platform. There's such a glut of them right now. There's very few people that can make them work. I hope it's not gambling. There's a lot of gambling stuff going on right now. I think Unicorn, they did an ICO last week. It's, an esports gambling token. They raised $25 million from a couple of random investments, and it's just I'm really curious to see what Gfinity will do. I think their tournaments are great. I think that they're probably a leaner version of ESL.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they've demonstrated their commitment to the space. I just want to see if they can do something different, or if they're just going to continue. We're going to make a more efficient version of ESL.
Well, now will be the time to prove.
Yeah.
Now
absolutely.
they have the funds to do something different.
Yeah.
So hopefully in a couple months, we'll look back on this story and we'll see some really cool announcements coming up from Gfinity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess for our final story, MSG, Madison Square Garden Company, they hired industry vet and Riot alum Nick Allen to head their esports division. Nick has been around the esports space for a long, long time, and I think one of the great things about Nick is that he's developed an amazing track record. He first came onto my radar when he was developing the IPL tournament series for IGN. IGN was owned by Fox, I think, so he had an idea of how does a smaller company fit into a larger company, like in the entertainment space. How do tournaments make money? What are their costs? From there, he was picked up by Riot, where he led their esports efforts for a couple years. So he understands Riot's motivations in the space. He guided them. While he was there, he very famously fined CLG numerous times for a lot of different infractions. From Riot, he went to Twitch. At Twitch, he was, I think, the VP of Esports. So he understood, okay, how do platforms make their money in esports? What are their, goals, incentives? What is their strategy supposed to be? And then, now that CLG just picked him up, with MSG, he gets to understand a little bit more about traditional sports, and he brings to them the visibility from his 3 previous positions. Most people in the space love Nick. I have nothing but kind words for him. I think, he's an incredible pickup. I think any company in the esports space would be lucky to have him. Mo, do you have any insight?
Well, I've only had one experience with Nick, and that was during Rocket League. When I was working for a traditional sports team, and we were looking into it, and his name kept on popping up. He was one of the kind of people that pushed really hard for the RLCS and for Twitch to start that together with Psyonix, and that's been a great success. And he has proven, whether it's with IGN, whether it's with Riot, and now whether it's with Twitch and Psyonix, and hopefully now with CLG and MSG, that he has a strategic vision of esports. Like he knows all the players, and he knows kind of where the trends are going to, and that's incredibly valuable for MSG. He will also be the CEO of CLG,
Mm-hmm.
Which is obviously a great pickup for CLG.
Yeah.
I like this kind of. He will probably be a strategic advisor to MSG,
Yep.
while being day to day with CLG. I think this is a great idea. What is really interesting is I wonder how this will affect the LCS application, possibly for CLG and MSG.
I don't think that CLG is. I mean, don't count your chickens before they hatch. But I think that CLG is going to be a shoo-in for the LCS just because of their history. It's TSM versus CLG. That's like the Subway Series of the LCS.
Yeah, but I just think it's going to make it even better, because now they can show we have someone who knows how to run this kind of
we
stuff.
We hired your old boss.
Exactly.
No, and and I think the other one that's kind of interesting is that Nick is doing this transition in his career about 8 months after he had his first child. So on top of the children that he has at CLG, he has his own child that's keeping him awake at night. So he's definitely powering through it.
And finally, I also think from what I talked with some of the NBA 2K managers, and they were all saying that they're incredibly happy to have Nick on board, because I don't think he's going to be day-to-day with NBA 2K, but his hands are going to be involved in that as well with MSG.
Yeah.
And I think this is great news for the NBA as a whole. Having someone like him who was with Rocket League, literally worked on kind of a similar type of game, and building a game with a big fan base to a successful esports title.
Yeah, he did this 3 times.
Yeah, I think this is a great pickup for the NBA as well.
Yeah, no, I mean it's It's interesting, yeah. Definitely a great hire. And yeah, I think we touched upon this last story a little bit earlier, we'll probably have to explore it later. But the unicorn coin offering, I think it was Mark Cuban and somebody else who were the majority of the buyers.
I think the co-founder of Ethereum.
I mean, there's so many co-founders of Ethereum. I just don't remember the name. It's
One
like
of them.
everybody runs around saying like they're the co-founder of Ethereum. But it's a lot of money to raise. Unicorn was previously struggling with, finding a jurisdiction in which they'll operate. There were rumors that they were going to pivot to Australia. I don't think that I ever saw anybody actually move to Australia. Their white paper, I glanced at it a couple of months ago. It made some sense. There's a lot of heavy regulations coming into the ICO space, so I feel like they were pressured to execute before it hit the US. I think China had a bunch of regulations that just kicked in. There was another international jurisdiction that I think also had a bunch of regulations that kicked in. I just hate that there's so much, not hate, but I'm apprehensive about the amount of interest ICOs and gambling have over esports. Esports has a very young user base, and ICOs are a heavily unregulated industry. So it just feels like people are trying to find loopholes in the gambling space that they can execute in. To give Raul credit, he has maintained an incredible level of professionalism and integrity while operating in the space. There's been a lot of temptations, whether it was with CS:GO skins or otherwise, to operate in a very gray to dark area, and Rahul has very famously stuck within the lines. So he has stuck within the lines. I hope that this war chest that he has developed for esports and Unicorn will be used for other things other than gambling. And I think there's plenty of opportunities, and I think he has plenty of insight into the space. And with his experience at Microsoft, at Voodoo PC, I hope that he will stumble over something that will push this industry forward.
Yeah, I don't have too much to say about it, primarily because I am happy with a little bit of Ethereum, and I don't know too much about ICOs, and that's definitely not my specialty. But once again, just to echo some of your sentiments, I am very hesitant when I read ICOs. I think they have been used as a money grab by previous esports companies before. I doubt that that's the case with Unicorn. I think it is meant so that they have a war chest to expand their company, and that they're actually going to do that. I don't think an investor like Mark Cuban would be happy with just we made $25 million. We'll lay low for a while. We don't need to do any of this unicorn stuff now. That's not the way Mark rolls. That's definitely not the way Raul rolls. So I am excited to see where they will end up.
Definitely. Well, I think that wraps up all the stories that we wanted to cover. Mo, any closing thoughts?
No, don't forget we're now available on iTunes. We're available on Stitcher for Android users, available on Blog Talk Radio, and as always, we're available on YouTube.
Yep, and make sure to follow us on Twitter. You guys can follow me at Joker Can't Spell. There's no E in Joker. Joker can't spell. Get the joke. And Mo, where can people find you?
You can follow me. You can follow me on Twitter at MREISENMANN.
Cool. Thank you guys for tuning in.